Number 11, Jaylen Waddle, playing opposite Tyreek Hill is, aside from Waddle's obvious talent, I mean, he's a great receiver. You play opposite Hill, man, that is like giving your game steroids practically, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And before we go into this group, I probably should have just written tier 3.5. I do feel like ASB, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, those are guys early second I'm okay with. Whereas these next three names are kind of the late second guys I'm looking at. So I do consider them viable wide receiver ones, but to me, they're a little bit of a step below than the three names we just talked about. But Waddle's still a step below. He is still an absolute stud. The tricky part is, Tyreek Hill on the other side. Yeah, he's going to command more volume. That's always going to be the case. And we did see Waddle drop from 140 targets as a rookie, was a monstrous workload, to 116 last year. But he was the second in terms of all the wide receiver efficiency metrics you want to look at in terms of points over expectation. He just spiked in efficiency in this McDaniels offense. Goes from 9.8 yards per reception as a rookie. He was kind of a dink and dunk guy, to then 18.1. A lot of it was just such a good scheme that everyone's drawn to Tyreek Hill. They dink it to Waddle, and he is just so fast that he can rip it right up down. Love to watch those plays. But also on the deep ball, they really unlocked what Waddle can do best and started to sling it deep to him as well. So despite that volume decrease, 30 less targets, he finishes the wide receiver 8 compared to the wide receiver 12 as a rookie, but great track record so far. There is a lower weekly floor. He did have 4 games under 6 points. So there are times when you're just feeding Tyreek Hill that he disappears. But still, number 2 in fantasy points over expectation. I do think the second year in the system, similar to how that could bump up Tyreek Hill, there's not going to be a negative by any means for Jaylen Waddle. So at minimum, more of the same for this guy that was the wide receiver 8 last year. Wheels up. There's very, very little to point. There's very few holes you want to poke in Jaylen Waddle besides the low usage, but man, he was efficient with it.
He was. Let's go to number 12, and that's Devonta Smith. We're now getting into guys, with Waddle. We're getting into guys that are like the number 2s on their own team, but are still, the offense is explosive enough. They're proficient enough where you're like, yeah, man, I would totally take a stab at this guy. The next guy is one of those guys too, for whatever it's worth.
Exactly. It's a kind of nice, they lined up exactly in that order. Number 2s on their own team, but really can be number 1s for your fantasy roster, particularly if you're loaded at running back early on. 136 targets did trail A.J. Brown, but 95 catches did lead the Eagles. The third most explosive offense last year was the wide receiver 9 in fantasy points. What happened to this guy being too small? He can't make it at the NFL level. No, I love the Slim Reaper. He's always been a beast. I always was a big fan of this guy's game, and he dominated, as we said. Very steady, too. Top 24 and 65% of his games. Yeah, the ceiling isn't quite as high as his teammate, but he had 2 30-point days, even though he only had 24% of the time was a top 12 receiver. 41% of the time was a wide receiver 2. So still had 65% of the time was a top 24 guy for you. I love that. Very consistent, even in a oftentimes run-heavy scheme. Just a safety blanket for Jalen Hurts. I love him. He's beautiful. Just, you're going to get the volume. You're going to get production. It might not be huge spikes win you the weeks, but he's certainly never going to lose you. He's always going to keep you competitive.
That's a fair argument. Next guy, again, falls into that same category. A number 2 guy on his own team, but is incredible, and that's Tee Higgins. I might like him even a little more than the 2 guys above him. I'm not sure, on the fence a little bit. I think I'm influenced by the fact that I've been a Tee Higgins owner, and you know how that affects you, and he did great for me, and so I'm always going to just be a little biased towards him. Tee Higgins at 13. You like this guy at the end of the second round, you're saying?
Yeah, just right there, the end of the second, and certainly if he falls into the third, still a big fan. I just want to reemphasize what we talked about with Jamar Chase. Whereas it was a 1A, 1B, with Chase having 140 targets and 136 targets for Tee Higgins across their first 18 games together when Chase was a rookie, it then became a clear-cut Chase is the wide receiver 1, 172 target pace versus 136 targets for Higgins. But that's where he was at. Still a lot of volume.
A lot of targets.
Absolutely. And he was on pace for 1,192 yards, 9.5 TDs, 87 receptions. That's a quality wide receiver 1 season in anybody's book. On any other team, this guy would be seeing 160, 170 targets, a true bona fide alpha, also in a contract year. That never hurts for motivation. There's only love for Tee Higgins. The only issue is he's just playing alongside a just generational talent in Jamar Chase. But other than that, I mean, he's not too far from generational himself in Tee Higgins. He's an absolute monster. Love the way he plays. A little bit boomer bust, definitely a little more inconsistent than some of these guys we've been talking about. But when he booms, it is huge. So yeah, big Tee Higgins fan. Definitely can be your alpha. If you go CMC early, Tee Higgins is a great target on that next way back.
And you like what? So what if you went like CMC and then and you dropped out of your top 7 wide receiver guys, and then you pick 2 of those. You say you go like Waddle and Higgins at the turn. You like that start for a team?
Oh, I would love that. That would be a beautiful start.
Okay.
Any of those guys, Devonta, T, Waddle, T. The only reason I might not do that is if Pollard continues to fall to late round 2. I just can't pass up Tony Pollard at his late 2 price. But yeah, I mean, CMC with 2 wide receiver ones in that sense, that's an incredible start. Love that. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.